Yeah, I think starting recording. Here we go. Good. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Aldair Borges.
Hi, I am Zuzana Hrušovská.
And I'm Jakub Tkadleček.
Perfect. Okay, great. Shall we get started then? Good. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm so excited because this is the first episode in which I bring 3 people from the same company. So 3 people who work together, and we're going to be able to share their perspectives on the same product, the same company. So thank you very much for accepting to join me for this episode.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Right. Let's set the scene first to give some context for the listeners about what your company is about, which company you work for. So actually what would be an interesting exercise is if each of you, from your own perspective, you give a description of what your company does. Who wants to start?
I can go first. So we work for a company called Mews. We started as a property management system company, but I would say we're more of a space management company. We manage the inventory and spaces for properties in hospitality.
Great. Is there another version that comes to mind? Zuzana, for example, how would you describe the company?
Well, the version I always give to people, such as my grandma, is that we are the brains of every hotel or of every property, and everything you need to know what's going on, who is checked in, who is checked out, who ordered what. We are the one that will just help you do your job, manage your property, and keep your guests happy.
Great, I love that. Have you heard of the mem test? And I like the idea of saying, oh, I'm going to explain things in simple words. So Jakub, you're the last one. No pressure.
As far as I'm concerned, Mews as a company is in business of dragging, kicking and screaming hospitality into the 21st century when it comes to the tech stack.
I love it. I love how you're bringing already different perspectives. Did you do this exercise before? Did you prepare? Did you cheat? And actually, because you knew I was going to ask you a question, did you coordinate?
No, honestly.
I forgot about it.
Here we go. Great. So one of the first things that we want to talk about is how your company operates as a product organization. So how the 3 of you, that product trio works together. And one of the first aspects, which is very trendy at the moment, is talking about product-led versus sales-led. So how would you define your company? Is it more on the sales-led side or is it on the product-led side?
I would say we've done a really good job in terms of pivoting more from, honestly, in the beginning, we're quite sales-led because we didn't even have a product team until about 3 years ago, I'd say.
3 years.
About 3 years ago. And ever since we started the product team, we've been doing a lot of work in actually putting product first. And I think we're starting to see that to fruition now of like the impact of actually having a product-led company, just in terms of how the company has grown over the last few years since we actually started a product organization.
Right. And I think that Jakub, you were there when there was no product organization then. So how were things at the time? How different was it then?
Very different. No, I don't really think it's comparable, right? The scale on which we operated 6 or 5 years ago is just you cannot put equal signs between those two things, that what we do now and what we did before. It was in many ways much easier, because it was just the amount of people that needed to make decisions on things were just so little, and we could actually fit everything in our heads, right? That's no longer the case, and it's not the case for years and years and years already. So, I think that being a product-led company and that type of switch actually enabled us to keep, a good pace, to keep the product in a good place, because it, by definition, means I think that there is more people with actual power to make decisions, right? And teams can make decisions on their own, and they can stand by the product that they are developing. And it's a very different vibe. It's a very different process. I think it's a good one. I think it really enabled us to grow this way.
When you said things have become more difficult, I thought you were about to say that since product management came in, things have been much more difficult.
But like it's a typical, like I think it's a very typical problem in like any organization, like let alone like a product company, right? Like it's decisions that you make, you need to be able to communicate clearly and properly to like other people with conflict in interests. And like it's that type of communication that is like very critical and turns out not natural to people, and like this doesn't come for free. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's a process. Everything is a process, and it takes a while to adjust to it, and we are still learning. But still the benefits are there.
Great. And Zuzana, so as the product design lead, do you think that the company has really operated that product transition? Do they really get the value of design, or are you still on that journey of having to educate people about why do we need design, why UX is important, and all of that?
When I joined, I think I was maybe the first designer like dedicated to really B2B part of our system, the first one to be there. And from my point of view back then, we were, not only like sales lead company, but from my point of view, it was very much like developer led company. So, and I would say we've gone a very, very long way since. And especially in my team, I don't feel like I have to, prove the value of the designs, because we've been together through so much, and we've seen, how things can go good and how things can go wrong. So it really, taught us how we can work and what needs to be done if we want to do good job, and if we want to like deliver something is functional and has value for the user. But there is still a long way to go also for designers.
Right. And you said there's the good and the bad, and people who listen to the podcast quite a lot may understand that I like to talk about the bad because that's why we're here, right? Okay, yes, we want to celebrate successes, but I also want to hear the stories of real life, what happened and what you did about that. So I seem to recall from a previous conversation that there was a time when sales almost was leading the roadmap and deciding what was going to go into that roadmap. So can you tell me more about that? Yeah, what happened?
I think that was very much in our early stages where we're growing, and sales was actively reaching out to new clients and actively looking for new opportunities. And then from there would be an agreement with the client, and then we would get asked as a product organization to then, okay, we need to deliver this set of functionalities so that, as a startup, so that we can close this deal, so that we can grow, because we hadn't been proactive as product, which meant that in some cases, we were asked to build some very specific things by a property, and maybe it was in the sales contract in some cases. And the one example I think echoes to us was when we had to build, I won't even say the specific functionality, but a very specific feature that was literally very well laid out by the sales team and very well laid out by the customer that wanted it. It was going to be a great feature. It's going to open up great opportunities for even more customers to use our system. Without looking at it too much, we're like, okay, this sounds amazing. It sounds like you've done your research on it. It sounds very practical. We went back and we built it, and then we released it, and then we sat there and no one used it. And for a long time, we looked at it and we just couldn't figure out why people didn't use it, until we actually started to ask the question of, well, why did you actually want this feature? What were you trying to achieve? And when we actually started to dig into that, we realized it was an entirely different set of features that they actually needed to actually fulfill their problem.
Yeah, we were not solving the problem. We were just like fulfilling the task. It was the order of the feature. And back then, I think we were very, very newly formed. Even the communication within the team wasn't so, I would say, natural and fluent as now, because we speak every day, either in person or remotely, but we are constantly in contact. And back then, it wasn't like that. And yeah, it was just like, let's do it. And we didn't ask those questions. And then we were surprised.
And we wasted a bunch of time
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
And what would you say was the impact on that? Like, did you feel like the morale in the engineering team, for example, going down? Or yeah, what was the impact of that decision?
Like the weird thing, like a quite quirky thing about this specific case was that that feature actually made total like logical sense, right? So like even like engineering team kind of looked at it and like, yeah, like that's that's
that's the problem.
It fits in it, it's fine. Like let's do it. And it was a really painful implementation, and we spent like 3 months doing it. And
I wasn't part of any of these conversations.
And that's part of it, right? And like at no point, because when we made this decision, it's logical. It sales tells us it fulfills the needs. It's great. And we didn't have that back and forth. Like we didn't have that like a validation steps, right? We didn't kind of like step back and said, do they actually, like, is that actually what they need? And yeah, and we went through like a very painful implementation of it. And the outcome was actually zero. Nobody needs it. Nobody uses it.
But looking back, we could have done much worse things. We could have done much bigger mistakes to learn something like that. And I have to say that like that learning, I think, was like so painful for us, or was just like so, okay, this is completely our fault. It was completely our responsibility, and we should have done this better. I think like after that, we very clearly saw what were like all the steps we could have taken to just avoid this situation. That I think from after all, we were like so much more mindful about how we approach every single task, or like every brief, every sales conversation even. So
yeah, it was probably the most valuable mistake we've ever made, to be honest.
Yeah.
I do seem to have this memory of us three looking at each other, like realizing that it just doesn't work.
Yeah, like.
And we had that like a the same thought. Like I think all three of us, like we don't want to do this ever again.
Yeah.
Like this is just not the way to go.
Well, to your merit, at least you didn't just ship something and then that's it. You looked at the analytics afterwards, which not everybody in the industry has time or has the capabilities to do. So we realized that, and you've changed course. And I'm a believer that sometimes you need to really make the mistake. And it's not really a mistake, it's a cultural thing. As you said, it's not your team, it's the way the company operates. And lots of companies are, they don't want to admit it, but they are still in that phase. Some are in journey to change to a bit more product mindset. So now, how did you turn this around? So you realized, you looked at each other and you said, okay, no, that can't happen. What steps did you do? Because there's the three of you and that is core to making that kind of change. But how do you go about convincing the sales team and saying no? How do you go about talking to leadership and say things need to change? What steps did you take to overturn the situation?
So I would say like the first thing was after we saw the data and we realized that people weren't actually using it, we actually started to we had a conversation with each other, and like a very honest one and somewhat painful one, where we realized on the product side, like, okay, this solves a business problem. Technically speaking, it's feasible and we can implement it. It's an iteration or something that exists, but we didn't involve design in that.
Doesn't solve user problem.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was the first point we realized we didn't involve each other, like the full trio, in making a decision. And we agree with each other that going from now on, like we should involve each other in these decisions. And I think for us, that was the very first step to say, okay, we know where we've messed up. And then we actually started to speak to clients about it and actually started to figure out, well, what exactly are you trying to do around this process? And we actually started running discovery calls as a product trio, so between design, product, and engineering, together to actually have a full perspective of what the problem was, so that we could actually frame what the value was of actually investing in solving this problem was for our leadership teams.
Beyond your team. Sorry, go ahead. No.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that, like, one of the things that you said is that, you know, we need to say no quite a lot, right? Which now we realize, and but we also realize that it's never just no, right? It's never us saying, we will not do this, like, go away. It always needs to be, we are not doing this, and these are the reasons. These are the, you know, roadmap maybe potentially, but like we have a good reasons for not doing stuff, you know, and because we are doing something much more valuable,
we
right?
should do even less.
We should even less. We honestly, like, we should think about things way more and doing way less, right? Like, which obviously, again, a hard place to kind of put yourself in, but it also means that we do have that particular kind of trust from, you know, everybody else in a company, that if we say no and we show like reasonable reasons for that, you know, we are trusted with that. Like, you know, the all adjacent teams and, like, you know, our management says, okay, they have a good reason. Let's talk about it in 6 months.
Yeah. This reasoning thing, it's really after this. I remember we when we actually started to do the discovery properly, and we really started to do the calls, and we started to untangle what is actually the real problem and what is the situation our users are in. Follow up to these discoveries, we did also like company-wide presentations, and I would say, as Jakub says, like explaining really the transparency of what we did, what was the results, why we've done it. This was, I would say, very, very important, because because everyone was just like, you know, running around like, we want this. And then when we actually did the research and we showed everyone, okay, you want this, but we talked to the clients, these are like all their problems. We need to, you know, prioritize this. And we really tried to, you know, start with much better transparency in terms of how we decide within the team, so also the rest of the company can learn how to better cooperate with us, and how to, you know, be a better part of this like discovery process. Because, you know, sales, even though sometimes it's like, okay, I want this feature, they talk to the prospects, they talk to those clients, and they have the knowledge, but we need to find a way how to communicate even with them better, so they have better visibility of what's going on, and we have better visibility of their needs as well. And yes, sometimes there is an overlap, and sometimes we have to say no.
And I think Zuzana touched on a really important part, which is that transparency with the stakeholders. And I think after this was the first time when we really started to focus on the discovery process ourselves. We actually started to find tools and processes that work for us, so that we have all the information in a place that was accessible to people. And we're also able to constantly share what we were learning and why we were learning it and the direction we're going, and give reasoning behind it, to the point that we had the trust of all our stakeholders. The entire company had an easy place where they could go, figure out what we're working on, figure out what we're learning, and why we're going the direction we were going. So we're able to really have consistent trust in the decisions we had. And even when someone would challenge us within the organization, which is completely normal, right? Especially if they want us to go a slightly different way, we had the information that had the backing, where we said, here's why we're making this decision. Here's what we think the outcome was, and here's why we're focusing on it now rather than doing X.
Right, and it seems to have worked, because I have a question for you, which seems to say that your chief product officer is convinced that you're doing the right thing now. So let's hear this question.
Hey team, I have a question for you. I think that you've mastered continuous interviewing and engaging with customers and getting their insights. But I do see that many B2B SaaS businesses struggle with engaging with the customer from their product teams. So I'd like to ask you to share, your best practice or your recommendation to fellow product trios on how to step into that space and how to master it as well as you have. Thank you.
Right.
It's a great question.
That is a great question. But so the first part I would think is the customers that you really need to speak to are often the hardest ones and the most upset ones, but they're also often the most valuable ones, especially as your product grows. We often start with the smaller and the easier clients and you solve smaller business cases. But when you look at the top of the funnel, the more complex business cases, and that's ideally where you want your company to be growing to and solving, those are the people you actually need to go out and speak to. And it's tough to sit. In our case, we would actually go physically and visit some hotels. It's tough to actually see how they're working and see like how the product isn't solving their problems and what's actually making them frustrated. But it gives you such an honest perspective of what you need to solve and builds a lot of empathy between you and the customer. And it makes you actually much more confident in what you're working on. So I would definitely say like go out there and speak to people. It's going to be hard, but they will be the most valuable people for you to speak to.
True.
Yeah.
Like I think especially I think like one thing that's I feel a little special for like tech managers and like tech people in general is that I would absolutely recommend like everybody getting into the business side of the things as soon as possible and as deep as they possibly can, right? Like it's not, even though you are a backend developer, or like a front-end developer and you are essentially just like making the code, like get into the like odds and ends of the thing that the users are and will end up using, that what they will do with those features, like how they work, why they are doing what they are doing, like I think this is very important when it comes to then being able to participate on those calls with the customers so that you can be there and you can hear specifics about things that you already understand. And then you can push the customers or like whoever is on that call to maybe give you details, right? Like to push them to explain themselves, in a more specific manner, and get a little bit behind the curtains, because people will often obviously state their problems, and then we are kind of faced with this turning the problems into actual solutions. And it really helps if you know what the baseline is.
Yeah. Two things about this. Like one thing, definitely Jakub being part of our continuous discovery. I would say this is a thing that really puts us far ahead from other teams, because really great ideas very often really come from developers who know how the system is built, and they just see connections maybe the rest of us don't see. And I would say Jakub being part of these calls also motivates other developers in the team to be interested in this. We have backend developers from the team also joining the calls when they are working on something new and they want to see how the users will actually use what they will be what they are working on. So really this, I would say, also improve buy-in from other team members. And I would say the second thing is, and this is very, I know it sounds very basic, but whoever is in charge of the call, whether it's a product designer, product manager, tech lead, researcher, just prepare ahead and set expectations with the rest of the team. Like sometimes you can maybe you can think that you will be leading the discussion, and then you realize halfway through you have a new team member on the call and he keeps jumping in and giving the questions that are out of order, and maybe you've planned to ask them later. But for example, the way we talk with our clients is in our case, me, but it can be whoever we prepare. We have a script, we have questions, we really share them together before the interview. So everyone really has expectations set. They know what we are be asking, in what order. So we just don't confuse the client on a call or in person completely, which can happen pretty easily. And then we can more effectively work as a tandem and really get that valuable information. And the second topic is, of course, setting expectations for a client, which sometimes they come there with just like 2 pages of feature requests list. So that's a different topic.
I definitely think setting expectations with your client is one of the most important things.
And hardest.
And it is difficult, like even if it's setting it when you're sending them an email explaining them why you want to do discovery, but starting the call of saying, here are the problems that we feel we can solve right now. We'll totally give you the space at the end to like tell us whatever you'd like to talk about with the product, but here's how we can help you right now. And that makes a huge difference between leaving a discovery call and going, we just learned so much. Here's what we can actually have information to do stuff with it, rather than leaving with, like Zuzana said, just a long list of feature requests, and it's not going to benefit you and it's not going to benefit your users either.
Yeah.
I think how I see it is it's been your role to educate the rest of the business on why you're doing things with that approach and how you're doing it. And there's a role of education to the client as well to say, yes, we understand you've got all those concerns, but right now we are focused on this particular area of the product. We'll take into account all the other feedback, of course we want it, but right now we're talking about that. And this is something they're not always used to having, in terms of focus. Great. So that concludes the first part about how your company moved from sales and engineering, yes, a driven roadmap and approach to being more product-led, and how you've helped pivot and have both your client and your customers and people internally understand this. And you've mentioned something, Zuzana, about sharing information, and also one of the pieces of advice was let's bring the developers in those calls. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about how you share information between yourself in this product trio, but also with the rest of the business. Great. So in the first part, we talked about how you've pivoted the company from being sales and engineering driven to being more product-led. And one of the final pieces of advice was bring people to the discovery sessions, have them hear firsthand what the customers are saying, and share that knowledge, educate people about your approach and your findings. So we're going to talk about how we share information as a product team in this second episode. So my first question to you is, how do you share as a product trio information? Like, do you have lots of meetings? This is mostly written. What do you like? Have you got different styles?
That's a loaded question. We share in many different ways. I would say like Aldair is our champion of communication and of sharing all information and all outcomes of all of our research. But like apart, I will leave you to it and then.
I would say, so we actually don't have a lot of meetings between each other. I think in the beginning we might have started having weekly meetings, but we realized we got to a point that we really trusted what each other were doing, that we know that we advocate for our team. We have completely different perspectives, but whether I'm in a meeting or Zuzana is in a meeting or Jakub's in a meeting, we're able to bring that information back. We tend to use Dovetail a lot for our discovery. So we have a central source of discovery. Whatever we learn, we'll record it and we'll put it in Dovetail, add a few notes, and we actually don't just share it with each other. We share it with our entire team. So we have a Slack channel with the team, and we'll just write a couple of highlights and put a link to our research repository and say, you can read more here or watch the recording. So that's like the primary source of continuous discovery, how we share information. But Zuzana also created a really great thing like a discovery board which we now use as sort of the central source of information. And it means we can actually share information asynchronously throughout discovery. And she's really framed it through like the whole double diamond framework. So we don't consciously have to think about what we're doing and when. Everything's already written down and all the links to different sources are always there. So it means that we can time box what we're working on really easily. And if things are going over, it's super easy to see, okay, here are the gaps and here's what we need to work on as well.
I would maybe say they are like different layers to knowledge sharing. Like first, or the smallest circle is of course Jakub and Aldair, and that's, you know, the fastest one, the most frequent one. And then, you know, there is that our team. Then if I go out, it's the rest of the team that we work with. Either we have maybe dependencies with, or we touch like similar parts of the system, and then broader, you know, more stakeholders in the company. And then of course sometimes there are some topics we really like highlight on a company level. And of course it's always about the level of the detail, and also about the level of education. Because for example, if we, as Aldair said, if we are having like continuous discoveries, we always would summarize it for the team. But then at the end of the research, or not even at the end of the research, but after a few sessions, we sometimes want to really highlight it for the whole company. Like, this is what we did, these were the outcomes, these were like our approach, just for them to learn, and to maybe, you know, take our approach and make it their own, or change it, and to just share it publicly, so we can be maybe even more product-led in the future.
So that's interesting, because I've tried broadcasting basically this to the rest of the company, saying this is what we've learned, and I find this mixed responses. Some people would read it, some people would not. So I'm not quite sure it always works. So in the first episode, we talked about the fact that you launched a product and then you measured how much people used it. Do you know how much people use this information? Do they actually read it, listen to it? Do they know when then you have a conversation with them and you say something, they're like, oh, they already know about it because you broadcasted it? Or do you think that there's better ways maybe to communicate to the rest of the company?
So like, I think first and foremost, we are measuring it for ourselves, right? Like, we are building like our data, you know, with the help of our data teams, to kind of convince ourselves that we did, you know, good things, or that there are parts of the system that we need to focus on more. And honestly, like, at least to me, like, this is a lot of it is eye candy, right? Like, we are sharing the results of the features that we deployed, you know, or some fun facts about the things that are happening, you know, in our production environments and stuff like that. And like, that just draws people in. I feel like, you know, like, we are slowly and you know, over the months and months, we are building an audience of people that are interested in this sort of stuff. It takes a while, but like, it's, you know, it's first and foremost, it's valuable to us. So if others want to partake, that's great.
And I think we started using Loom maybe a year ago now.
Yeah.
And that is a really
2
great
years.
way, 2 years, it's been a long time. We find that's a really great way to keep people engaged, because, and we actually just keep the videos under 5 minutes. Like, it's incredibly difficult to explain everything you've been working on, whether it's just in a sprint or in a couple of months, in less than 5 minutes. But if you can highlight the most important part for your stakeholders, that is such a great way to keep people engaged, where they don't have to be reading pages and pages of documentation or sitting through really, really long meetings. Like, we do a thing called lunch and learns. I think mostly when we're running discovery, so maybe once or twice a quarter, we'll do like a lunch and learn, where we'll sit there and say, okay, here's a topic that we've been doing discovery on. We have some insights that we've learned. We have some outcomes. We want your feedback as well. So we want to make it engaging. It's not just a one way of us presenting information to people, because I think that's the easiest way to lose engagement with your audience, is just speak to them and not appreciate the value of their feedback as well.
Also, I would say what helps is the topics we usually present or we talk to are topics that are basically like we often touch pain points to a lot of people. Like it's including sales, including customer care, including people in product and development, and that's a good thing. That actually means probably that we touch something that really is impacting a lot of people, a lot of our clients. So that's also people want to come there because it really affects them and their daily life as well.
And in turn, like there is a lot of vested interest within the company to kind of see like the new shiny thing and like have the latest scoop on stuff as well.
Does that not put pressure on you to deliver shiny things, and especially on the engineering side, because you've got to push for sorting technical debt and all of that? What do you think of that? Because if you say, well, we've worked for 3 months on technical debt, do you think that audience is going to be that big?
Like this is all about, at least like from my point of view, this is all about like the way we label this, right? Like I can either tell people that we spent 3 months consolidating something, or I can show them that we increased the performance of some specific modules by 30%, right? So sometimes you just need to package it a little bit different way. And especially, and like some things are very easy to sell people on, right? Like bug reduction, or maybe for whatever speed, for whatever reason, our customers run into system crashes or something. Whatever you pick, like we don't tend to make engineering decisions for the sake of engineering decisions. It's just it takes a little while and like a little bit of effort to package those engineering decisions, in some digestible manner for everybody else.
Also, I think something like, pardon me, Jakub is very good at when he's explaining very technical concepts is being very specific about what the outcome of that is and what the actual impact. And a lot of the time when there's like a technical consolidation, people don't see visually what the impact is, but being able to show them, even if it's just a chart for the speed, and to see actually how it's changed and to explain, well, now that this is in this position, it means that we've opened up an opportunity to develop new sets of functionality. Our users will experience the system in a different way. And I think it's really good at conveying that to people as well.
Yeah, we actually spent quite a lot of time on packaging technological things with product ones, right? So they always kind of come up as a one thing, and like we can describe it in a digestible manner.
Right. So you said you use Loom because it's asynchronous and the three of you don't have that many meetings. But Zuzana and Jakub told me that Aldair, you're in lots of meetings. So what are all those meetings about? What keeps you so busy?
Yes.
It's not with them. I spend a lot of time in meetings, sometimes too much, with stakeholders essentially. So it's a balance of actually being able to convey what the team is working on and why we're working on specific topics, but also being involved with other product teams because our product is growing incredibly quickly, right? We went from, I think, 6 or 7 teams at the beginning of the year,
To 20.
maybe less.
24.
Yeah, so 6 or 7 teams up to 24. So all our teams, like even if they get small, there's a very fine line on how they're linked. Like they very closely interact across the product. So I do spend a fair amount of time speaking to other product managers, speaking to the stakeholders in the company, constantly engaging with sales, with commercial, and with places like customer care. Like there's an incredible amount of information that we miss if we don't listen to our support teams. And a lot of the times we get information through the way of things like tickets. But if you actually spend time with the support teams and actually go to the support desk, spend 15 minutes or spend 2 hours there, like actually answer a support ticket, I promise you it brings back a whole different perspective. So I'd say a lot of those meetings that I do are with cases like that, but also joining pre-sales calls and actually understanding, like, as we're growing, what is being expected in the market, what are people asking of us, And in hospitality, people have been using really, really old versions of systems, right? And a lot of those are very much restricted by the fact that they were on-premise, the technologies that were available at the time. So even their expectations are completely different. And being able to see that in product and be able to inform the team that, listen, now we're starting to think already what we're working on for next year. So I'm in calls with some pre-sales calls, speaking to the different departments and trying to figure out, which direction we're all going as a company, so that as a team, we figure out what we're going to be working on in terms of our product quality, its performance, and what brings the best value to our users. That was a very long answer.
No, perfect. And seems that you're doing the product manager role as we expected. But going back to your first point at the beginning of this episode, where we said, oh, it's so important to have everybody hearing customers talking, being in the user research. Do you bring sometimes the rest of the team to those pre-sales calls, those calls with the support team? Is this also part of you bringing everybody into that?
Yeah, for sure. And it's, I will admit, it's not all of them. I don't want to overwhelm them. But I always like to make sure the team is involved in the decisions we're making and understands why we're working on stuff. There's a huge amount of value in I don't want to be, how would I say this, sort of the blocker and the middleman. I feel that everybody has the right to know what we're working on, what the problems are. And we've been really fortunate that I feel like I've spoken to other product managers, maybe in different companies, and they mentioned that like getting engineering on a call is difficult. I think having Jakub on those calls has put our team so far ahead in terms of how fast we make decisions and why we make them. And you can already see it from the way the team accepts what ideas and problems we put towards them. And it also means that as a product manager, I'm not falling into that trap of saying, hey, this is what we're solving and here's how we're solving it, but rather being able to frame the problem and having Jakub there and Zuzana being able to frame exactly how the solution delivers and will be delivered and how it'll affect the users. It is so nice, and to the point that some of the people in the team are willing to and actually speak to customers. Right? Like it takes a bit of confidence to get everybody there, and I think again that's something Jakub's done incredibly well. That he's groomed the team to be open to actually going to visit customers, going to actually listen to their problems.
Yeah, Jakub, maybe what did that take? Because I've been in companies where some developers, they wanted to code, didn't want to talk to the customers. Did that take some training? Did that take some convincing, or did it come naturally? What did you do?
I would say they do it just because they see that it's possible, right? Like it's not, like whatever the preconception there is about developers, in the world. It's obviously all true. But like more than that, like they spend a huge amount of time on this like a virtual thing, in this code space that takes the data and manipulates the data and then like returns the data. And I honestly feel that having that sort of work grounded in some real stories from real people about real problems, in a real world, I think it changes perspective. It's no longer, you are no longer manipulating data cubes, in a system. You are all of a sudden solving like a specific problems for a specific person on a front desk of the hotel. And it's just, I think it shifts like an ownership of, your work quite a bit more on like every single person, instead of, us three saying, we are running the product. Like we are maybe running the team, right? But like they are making it. And if we have QA engineers engaged in, discovery, and they know what we will start making in 3 months, and they can prepare automated tests for it, already because they know it will happen. That's perfect. That's great. That's them thinking way ahead and being way ahead of the curve as well.
I would say like general mindset of everyone in our team, it's that we are solving a problem and not that we are like, making a piece of code which will just go away after I'm done and I don't have to ever see it again. I would say that we really nicely, somehow, naturally managed to just cultivate that mindset with everyone with the team, like that mindset where the developer asks you after, I did this, do we have data on this, what do users say, what do users say, is it performing, yes or no, because they are just naturally curious, because that's just something we communicate within the team every day, even during discoveries, like from the design point and discovery and design. Like when I am designing something, Aldair mentioned Loom videos, Figma, or if we have any outcomes from usability testing, I would share all of that for developers and for everyone in the team, just to see that ahead, even though we are maybe not working on that yet, it hasn't been approved and finished yet, but it's just like keeps everyone in the loop and helps bringing in new ideas.
Like one thing that I actually want to point out as well is that this really is like a whole team, right? So if that team sees Aldair actually making code changes, like he actually commits into our code base, right? And Zuzana actually like looking into the hard data, in our monitoring system, like that brings them to this like a mental space where, oh yeah, actually, if they are doing that, if they are doing like a little bit of my job, right? Like actually there's this like a innate permission of I can actually like talk to customers, because like why wouldn't I? That this would help me so much to do my job better.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have like strict lines between us. I don't think it has ever happened like, whoa, this is my part. I am one, I don't know, framing the problem. It's not your job. It's like that has never happened. Is all the culture is very open in terms of like questioning, asking about anything, really going there and back, and everyone has a space at the table to just step in and ask or propose anything.
Yeah, and I think that leaves so much space for people to actually be creative and to be curious, right? When you put walls up between what you can and can't do, suddenly you start thinking in a really narrow lane rather. And then when you open it up, you can be curious about whether it's you're in engineering and you want to look at data, or whether you're in design and you want to look at data. You can actually see the impact of your work and really understand that you are making a difference. And I think like breaking down those walls, it's so much more fun to work when everybody's constantly curious and constantly has ideas and different opinions. It's really nice.
I actually got this question when we had this trio talk in public, and I think one guy asked me like, okay, if he was a designer, so what amount of information from your PM is like too much? Like, do you care about all the business stuff he's throwing at you? Because it was kind of like, where do you draw the line between the information from your PM you're just not interested anymore, and those which are like valid for you? And I just told him there's no line. Like literally everything both Jakub and Aldair share with me, either like insights from the business or more background about how things are built and why certain things can or cannot be done. It just gives me wider view of the world we are trying to improve and build. And I would say it's vice versa. I share everything I can with them, and I think there's great value in that.
Great. And that's quite impressive. So well done on this, given what you've talked about in the first episode, which was, moving from being a sales and engineering-led organization. So congratulations on this way of working, which is much more aligned with a product mindset. I can't help but thinking that this has a toll on the output, the velocity. You have to be involved in some meetings instead of, developers just being focused on coding. You share some information, it takes time to get that information, to write it or to communicate it, recording those Loom videos. So all of this takes a bit more time and can impact the the quantity of output, but it's fine because a proper product team needs to be focused on outcome. But does this mean that there's been an impact on the resourcing? Like, did you have to hire one more developer, for example, or do you have some help from a UX researcher who can help you with those interviews, product operation or program management who can help you think? Do you have some help, or do you just absorb it as a team?
Have help, thanks God.
Thanks God. This is coupled with like Mews growing so much, right? Like especially in past 2 years, I guess. Yeah, like we obviously, like all of these teams that exist around us, like we are not the lone island in the middle of the ocean, and it's so much help from everybody else, especially if we have a like particular problem that we don't have expertise in, right? Like we can go to a different team and say, guys, like I have no idea how to measure customer effort score. Like, can you help us with that? And yeah, that's great. And like obviously that means that we are willing and able to kind of onboard a request from other teams, and maybe help them if they struggle with some particular part of the system that we might have a better expertise in.
We've been hiring now, I guess, product marketing teams as well. I think for the first time, the last quarter, we actually engaged with product marketing to do like market research in an initiative we're working on, which is something we'd have, because we would have touched on it a bit, but the amount of depth of information they were able to give us was incredible. It made such a big difference in helping us move much, much faster. And I think the same with our research team now, that we have research and we can, for example, if Zuzana creates a prototype, she can hand it over to the researchers and they can actually go out and speak to customers, and it frees up our hands to continue to the next version and look into the data and be able to answer a different set of questions. So it's really handy as you grow. Once you're able to have those additional teams, it helps you speed up your process a lot.
Yeah. But I don't think I ever felt that us being on meetings kind of impacts what we can achieve in the end. Like obviously
it's still faster than doing it in a wrong way.
Yeah, sure.
And the need then to redo it. So
and like obviously everybody has this like a veto vote. If you feel that you can be on a meeting, like don't be. Like it's great. Like if you feel comfortable with the workload, if you don't, like we will figure it out. That's fine.
But it's your responsibility and privilege to manage your own time. It's just it's in everyone's hands.
And honestly, I think we save a lot of time because we don't have like, once we're done with discovery, suddenly have to sit with like an hour-long call with the entire team to go through everything we've learned from discovery from the start. It might have been like a week's worth of discovery or 2 weeks, but it's a huge amount of information to go through with the team, explain to them the problem, why we're doing it, all the data points. And they're inevitably asking questions that we asked during discovery. Whereas once we get to the call when we are looking at an initiative that we're going to invest in, it's not trying to describe to a team. It's 30 minutes of how do we groom and slice this issue? Why are we slicing like this? What is technically possible? And you move so much faster because you spread that throughout the entire discovery process.
Yeah. And also us not building MVPs anymore really makes this much faster as well.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah.
Agreed.
What's the story around that? MVPs? Was it not a thing before? What's the story?
We have a very strong...
I touched on something.
We don't do MVPs. We don't like it. It doesn't work for us.
We dislike it as a concept.
Yeah.
We strongly believe that like having like our product is quite mature at this point, right? We're iterating and building on top of existing functionality. If you are a brand new product coming to market, sure, it makes sense to have an MVP and figure out the product market fit, how are people using it, do people want to use it? But when you're iterating on a growing product and you're expanding, the biggest lie you can say to yourself is, I'm going to work on this will be the MVP, and we'll come back to it in 3 months. Because 6 months will go by, and then 9 months will go by, and you haven't touched it, and then 2 years go by, and all your users are using is the minimum viable, and
sometimes not even.
And it's not even. It's not the minimum lovable. It doesn't provide a minimal experience. It doesn't provide any minimal value to your users. There's more to like an MVP than just saying good enough. There are iterations that you need to go through, and like being able to beta test functionality and put it in front of your users and be able to continuously iterate to a point where, okay, we know it solves value. How do we make it in terms of the design? Like, how do we make the experience actually lovable? How do we make it like scalable to different business types? And then you actually can put it out in the world for something that's much stronger, and you can spend more time on that. It's sort of like having OKRs for a quarter versus stretching them out of this is what the company is achieving this year and breaking down on how you can achieve it. That MVP is just saying like we're done and then we're gonna have a whole different direction.
It also increases the risk from our point of view, because MVP usually is something like MVP is bigger than the minimum slice we can do. And we have good relationships with our customers, and a lot of customers are very keen to be beta testers. We have customers who are like, okay, do you have something even earlier than beta testers? We want to try it, because they are willing to accept the fact that this is just some partial functionality. But like cooperation with these customers really helps us to like find out whether there's a problem very, very early on. If I would be launching something up after its MVP, I can maybe catch a problem after spending 3 months on it instead of 3 weeks. So
like just saying MVP like I think at least puts people in a weird headspace. Like it's
negative one.
Well, yeah, like because you're already saying, this is product, this is viable, this will actually work, this is like I cannot do any less than this, with the minimal part. And like either that all of these things are true, and in which case you are just building product, like just call it a product, or you don't know about at least some of those three things, in which case you are doing an experiment, just call it experiment, like just like put people in a place where they are willing to remove it again if it doesn't perform, right? Like if it doesn't work, let's get rid of it. Yeah, and saying MVP I think it just prevents people from like thinking that way.
Great, and that's going to be a great link to our next conversation in the following episode, which is about what's your goal, what does success look like? How do you agree, all of you, that you're satisfied with what you've delivered? So before we move on to that, I'm just thinking about the people who listen and will think, wow, this is great, the way they operate and share information. I, as a product manager, want to do the same. What can I do? So if each one of you could say what a product manager should tell to your team. So what should a product manager tell to engineering, design, and to other product managers to say, to suggest the idea that this is the right way to work?
So what should like Aldair tell us to?
No, Aldair. Okay, good point. No, so if Aldair was a product manager, what would? Well, you are. No, okay, let's not take Aldair. So if Zuzana, you were a product manager, what would you tell a UX designer to convince them to work that way?
Do you want to start?
I can start.
Okay, go.
So the product manager should say to tech people, so tell me how do you build it, right? Like give them the opportunity to like build it in their heads themselves first.
I would say the product manager should not say, but really include the UX designer or the product designer, and just to really make them feel like both of them, are deciding, because in some companies, I've seen product managers being kind of, bosses of the team, where they would, just maybe put their opinions on others and basically saying, okay, designer, design this. But I wouldn't say that's the place where you can be the most, fruitful and bring up the best from this relationship. So from product managers, I would say, like, don't be a boss to your designer. You are peers, and together, with the tech lead, you can bring in the best. It's not like you are ordering what we are going to do. It's like you're just, bringing others in to do it. I
Okay.
kind of got mixed in it.
Yeah, good point. And so Aldair, so you said the product team has grown quite a lot over the last year. So if that wasn't the mindset of these other product managers, and I'm sure you've talked to them, what did you tell them to convince them that this is a good way to work?
Listen to your team, because if you can bring them, or rather, listen to your team and bring them the problems, don't bring solutions. Your job as a product manager is to translate those business problems to your team so that they can find solutions. Like, the best products are built by engineers. They are designed by designers. If I go and I am terrible at designing or drawing, Zuzana is having a good laugh because it's terrible. If I go to Zuzana and go, I have this amazing idea, we should do this, and tell the same to Jakub, immediately they're going to be like, okay, what is it? But
Why?
And why? And it's just going to be a whole bunch of questions, like exactly what you would ask a customer. But if you're able to frame that you have an opportunity for a problem for you to solve together, respect that you don't know everything. You don't know or have the expertise in every single part. And some people do. They've been experienced in the different roles, but the people are good at what they are good at. And if you're able to open up those ideas and be open to people's perspectives, and sometimes you're not going to agree with them. Sometimes you're going to question what they say. But if you're actually open to the information they give you, it's so nice to work with a team that's then engaged with information. They're not standoff, and it helps you move so much faster, and you will enjoy every problem you're solving. Because I think a lot of what we do and a lot of why we like product and engineering and design is we like to solve problems. We don't like people to give us a puzzle and tell us, this is this puzzle I finished. Tell me how great it is. No, give me the puzzle pieces. Let's fix it together.
Right, perfect. And that is a nice transition into everybody's got their area that they are strong in. So UX, product, and engineering. And how do you make sure you are aligned in the way you measure success? So we'll see that in the next episode.
Thank you.
Great. This is the last episode. So what people don't know, well, I think they expect, because they see you dressed the same way, I mean, so is that we've all recorded all these episodes at the same time. So feel free to have a drink, because that's quite a lot of talking. But yeah, very exciting. I've learned so much already, and I'm looking forward to this final piece, because as a product manager, I'm often asked, yes, but what's the outcome? Like, why do we do this? Why should you, why should we invest in this area of a product? What does good look like, and what are the measures of success? So this is what we're going to talk about. And I want to start maybe with the product side, because that's the one I'm most familiar with. How do you measure success? What is a good product, a good feature that's been released for you?
I would say a good product or feature is something that changes the way your customers behave. If your goal is to put something out in the world, you should be focusing on the change that it will affect, right? So that should be the outcome that you look at. And of course, when you're iterating through things, you need to be able to measure the impact and the adoption anyway. You should be able to know when you're releasing something, this is how I believe people will behave in the long run. But in terms of, so like your lagging metrics, but in terms of your leading metrics, what information am I going to look at that proves to me that it is changing behavior? Because your hypothesis might not be true. So you need to be open to the fact that if you're wrong, you should be able to pivot to different decisions in a different path and have a reason for that. So if you're able to set up metrics on how the usage is going during the adoption, it'll help you identify and speak to users who aren't using it, or speak to users who started and stopped, and figure out, I noticed you started using this and you stopped. Would you be willing to talk to me about why? So I think if you really break it down to the fine parts, it helps you look to the future, but also be capable of quickly pivoting to any idea as well.
Right. And we were talking about MVPs in the last scenario. And I know MVP is especially a word that UX designers don't like because they're like, no, we need a good user experience. And in one of the previous episodes as well, I talked to a UX designer and I said, how do you measure, like, what's the ROI of UX design? So what do you think is a good product? When do you say, I've done a good job as a UX designer, Zuzana?
Well, I think on the topic of measuring UX, we could have a completely separate episodes, multiple ones. But yeah, like in terms of improving the UX, there are two things. Sometimes, we look at really solving the problem, and that is, considered to improve the situation of the customer because he doesn't have the problem anymore. And then the second is, really improving the UX in terms of like how much better is the experience? Does the customer likes it more, or is it easier? Is it faster? And if you break down, UX into like, what does it actually mean? What are all those individual metrics that are contributing to good UX? We can break that down and measure individual metrics there. So again, like this goes hands in hands with our hypothesis, what is our expectation, how people will use this, but also there are qualitative metrics. Sometimes sometimes we get a lot of feedback, even that one we didn't ask for originally, of course, so that one comes in very often. And yeah, it's a combination. In terms of measuring UX, we need to combine it from a lot of metrics, and I would say every problem is different, every task is different. Sometimes we use MPS test score, sometimes we look at the hard data. It depends.
Great. What about you, Jakub?
Like, if people are pushing the buttons, it's all good. No, like it's like maybe this kind of differs now that I'm thinking about it. In our use case, when we are very like as our team is very heavily B2B team, right? So like in our case, it doesn't necessarily work, that kind of like Aldair would come in and we would say like people hate feature, like we would look into the hard data, we would see, yes, they are not using it, right? In a B2B, like those people don't really have an option. Like if we make a workflow and they can still hate it, but they don't have any other choice than keep using it, right? So
that's bad UX.
Yes. So now that we need to look a little bit behind the scene, right? Just like a plain usage, or like people just ignoring a button somewhere. It doesn't really tell the whole story for B2B, especially because our users are using the system in many cases for 7 years now, and that system went through so many changes. So, maybe we just made a change that is not visible enough for them, or maybe we did something that potentially crashes for them a lot, or, something like that. So it gets little, I think you need to kind of keep testing your assumptions a lot, especially with the B2B crowd when, they just can't escape you easily.
That's true. And one thing to keep in mind, like with B2B, it's as Jakub said, they don't have an option. I would say in terms of experience, you really have the responsibility for that person to really make their life easier and to really help them. Because if you are in B2C, you don't help them, the customer moves away, then of course you have other things pressuring you to improve. But then in our case, you go to the reception and you really see how people are struggling, how they are using the system, and you really realize your user experience is directly impacting like how they look like. If they have 500 people to check in on the reception and your usability is horrible and it's hard to do, it takes long time, they don't understand it, it will be a pain. It will be pain for all 500 guests. It will be pain for the receptionist. And yeah, you just need to make it easy for them and not make them think much in some cases, just to make it effortless. Yeah.
When you said B2B customers don't really have a choice, they have to use it, I had so many names of products I am forced to use on a daily basis. So, okay, here, let's do a round. Can you name one? And for product managers listening, if you manage that product, don't be offended. It's all right. We're here, we can give you feedback. Okay, any product from the top of your head?
Go.
Microsoft.
Microsoft as a whole.
I might ask to cut it out after.
Come on, I was about to say Microsoft Teams. Yeah.
Microsoft Teams, for sure, is moving from the Google Suite.
It was hard.
It was hard. It was hard to let go.
You don't have Slack. You use Teams.
Now so that's
exactly
we kept Slack because Teams,
Yeah.
Okay, what about Jira? Everybody loves Jira, of course.
We don't actually use Jira.
Oh, okay.
We use U-Track.
Okay, cool. Well, you don't have to go through that then. I just click up. Yeah, it's amazing. Great. Back into the story. So, yeah, so what made me think of, I thought that was a very good thing to say that they don't have the choice, so they use it. So stop looking at usage. People use it. They don't have the choice. And measuring things which don't make sense, like, and just make us look good. Yeah, 2,000 people used it today. These are called vanity metrics. Do you think that sometimes you're a bit guilty of that, measuring vanity metrics to make the product look good? Is the leadership sometimes guilty of doing that, or asking for those metrics, which don't really add a lot of value compared to what you said initially, Aldair, which was, we want to see how the feature has changed the behavior, not if people actually used it 3 times a day.
I think our leadership team is very big on outcomes. They will see right through vanity metrics, like, oh, we just had 5,000 usages for this part a day, and they're like, okay, so what?
Yeah.
And you're like, well.
Yeah. Our leadership is like, you're on a call presenting, and if you have anything that even smell like a vanity metric, is like immediately, well, no.
It's back to the drawing board. But
yeah,
it is sometimes easy to fall into those vanity metrics, right? Like, you do want people to use what your team's been working on, what you've been working hard on, and you put out there. But the difference between, they've used it, and from a B2B perspective, like, okay, they're clicking this button, but they're clicking this button, so they've made X amount more money in a month. Even that feels good to say. Like, we helped people improve their business by doing this, and this is their business value. They save time, they save man hours. Suddenly you have more time to do your job, and you're not spending time clicking 5 times just to do something. That feels good as well, in the sense that it's not a vanity metrics, but knowing that you've changed that behavior and seeing the value is something that you can attribute really nicely.
Yeah. We don't want basically our users to use the system much. That would be the ideal case, I would say, in many positions. Yeah. If you get to the hotel, you don't want a receptionist to sit by the computer and look for a minute on the screen and then for a minute on you. It's like, ideally we should help them as much so they can they can focus on the people, and then they don't have to do that clicking around. And this is also interesting thing to measure.
And it's a strange thing to see, like in a B2B software, especially that not so much B2B software, I suppose, but our whole concept that everything we build should be made so our users spend less time staring at a screen and more time with guests. So them clicking on something 10,000 times is actually a really bad thing for us.
Yeah.
That means that instead of actually engaging with a guest that's visiting a hotel, they, like Zuzana said, they're staring at a screen and struggling to just find the name of a reservation. And I think we've all traveled before. By the time you get to your hotel, you want to put your bags down, you want to explore the city. You don't want to be standing in front of someone going, "I'm sorry, I can't find your name in the system." That is painful.
Right. I think it's the first time I hear a team saying openly, the less people spend time on the system, the better. That means the more successful we are. So a great job. And it's really good that it comes from your leadership as well, because sometimes it can be the opposite, leadership trying to prove, and I can understand, sometimes proving that we need additional resources, or the focus and the strategy, and then having to rely on those vanity metrics. Jakub, when we talked last time, you said, well, as a line manager, I care about the product, of course, but I also have a team, and the success and the goals I've got for this team, they're not exactly what you would measure on the product side. It's not, I don't measure like NPS and usage and how long people spend on the platform. I've got my own metrics for my team. So what are these?
I try not to measure them. It's like I would rather spend half an hour talking to every one of them than like figuring out, how to put them in a chart. It's quite difficult for me still to kind of capture the fact that, they, like each one of them obviously have like a different kind of life situation, right? Like different position, like different amount of like an hour in a day they want to spend on everything news. And it's like I just try not to put them in like little square boxes and like label them somehow. Yeah, I really don't have a good answer for you, unfortunately. Obviously, as a engineering guild and like as extension as a Mews itself, we do quite a bit of like a questionnaires. We use Office Vibe, I think, for that. So we have this type of like the Office Vibe will ask your direct reports, from time to time, some questions, some NPS score, like eNPS scores, some test scores from some decisions, stuff like that. So that's very helpful. But for me, it always kind of boils down to just talking to people. Yeah, I don't have anything more clever than that.
No, great. And I think that's important, the fact that, there's also a team, because when we were talking earlier about like tech debt, it can be frustrating for the engineers to not be able to solve those problems. So does that impact the way you work together as a product trio to say, well, the moral or the time it takes us to deliver one product is really impacting how the team feels, and I don't want them to leave, or we're using that technology and this is not good technology, and we want to be able to attract talent, so maybe we need to change technologies. Do you think that managing a team has an impact on the decision you make for the product?
I think sure, in a way of like making a good, or like promoting a good habit, like one thing that I'm very proud of actually is that like every single engineer that joins the team, will get in his first week, they will fix something, right? It doesn't matter what it is, but like it's something that they will actually get to the production, right? Like it's something that after 7 days, they can point their fingers to and say, I did that, and there are people using that, and potentially there's a data, like we lower the amount of bugs or something. So I think it's kind of what we talked about. Like it's just promoting the ownership of the things that we are doing. You know, in their special case, you know, a product as well as the code. But yeah, like having the ownership, having that like nagging need of maintaining and like understanding.
Right. And I'm curious about all of that data. You said, oh, we look at data, are people actually using the product? Do you have a tool for that, or does it all come from the log? Because I think it's the sign of a very mature company already, even though you're growing very fast, you seem to already be mature enough to have access to those analytics. Not every product manager is lucky to have this information. So have you had it for a long time, and what do you use?
I think we each have our favorite one. So we can maybe talk about, because we have so many
we have
tools.
the same
We
favorite.
have the same favorite.
Fair enough.
So
We like Heap.
We love Heap. Like when we moved over to Heap, we would literally, so it auto captures data, right? And it's a no-code tool, so you just go through the UI and you're able to answer questions literally like in 5 to 15 minutes maximum. You can go and say, okay, how often is someone using this page? What type of users are using this page? Which part of the page are they interacting with? How much time do they spend there? You can answer your questions incredibly fast, and you don't have to ask like your data team to go in and pull data off, you know, how many page views, or go all the way to Google Analytics, which is slow. There's so much convoluted information. It doesn't allow you the flexibility to pull together information and go down like a really nice rabbit hole sometimes of continuously asking a set of questions so that you can figure out how to solve a problem. And the best thing about that, because it measures user interaction data, then we have another tool called Looker that we export all that data to. And then we can look at both the data information from the database and the actual transactional data and put it together and make a decision from it. And for us, it saved us a huge amount of time. It also means that we can do things like run experiments. We can change the position of a button, add a new UI, and immediately be able to see exactly how users are interacting with it, and if they even are, or even launch a survey and just say, okay, we noticed that you've clicked here. Like, how do you feel about this feature?
We look at data often. We look at data a lot. Like both of us, Aldair and me, like we are more than familiar with Heap. We build dashboards. We are trying not to outsource everything to data engineer, because it just saves time. If I can help, if I can make every once in a while, like those small things, or even funnels, really helps us create our own dashboards, funnels, compare data, and it really makes the work much faster than, you know, make someone else to do it. But of course, for more complex complex types of data, or if you want really something very, very specific that is cannot be done through Heap, we would ask our data engineer. But Heap is great.
Right. This is music to my ear. Like the product manager looking at data. I mean, granted, now, you know, this is expected, but the UX designer looking at data, this is a perfect position to be in. So I really like this. Yeah, and thanks for sharing that story of how, you know, having the right tool, you know, makes such an impact. So what about yours then, Jakub? Because apparently it's a different one.
Sure. Like I will be the odd one out. Like we obviously monitor a health of, you know, everything we deploy. So I guess in our case it would be a lot of this monitoring will happen in New Relic and Databricks, which grants us, you know, this like a simplified access to the you know, data and the way to build dashboards on top of it and visualizations on top of it, so we can better understand the numbers. And yeah, like especially New Relic is really, really great. Like it gives you immediate access to whatever is happening, right? Like obviously, like the New Relic is kind of built on like this notion of uptime, you know, and error rates and alerting and everything else, which is perfect. But we also use it to kind of immediate, just like an overview, you know, like what kind of configuration this API call usually has, you know, like that sort of question is something that we can answer in 5 minutes, and it can really drive even a product decision, right? It's like, yes, actually people don't use this specific filter at all, and like we have, you know, months of data to kind of verify this on. So those two are really great effort of our infrastructure and data teams.
And then we have Looker. But also what is great that our data team also makes the effort to educate us, and they provide us with guidance, so we can also pull out the data ourselves from some of the tools they are using. Again, I wouldn't probably build a super complex dashboard by myself, but they will at least really introduce us to these tools, explain us how to use them, how to get some, you know, basic filtering, basic, you know, how to pull some data out of it, so we can then, you know, really save their expertise for something that is actually challenging, and oh, how many people clicked on, or how many people have this set up, or that I can pull myself then.
Yeah, because they're essentially they're able to focus on things like building out data models and answering super complex questions.
Exactly.
And they've given us the tool to be independent and be able to build those basic visualizations that help us to make answer like real-time questions.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I can't believe you've got a data team. That is amazing. And you've got all these tools which can help us. So I guess my next question is, if there are some product managers who, like me, are dying for this, and maybe it's not the right phase, you know, I work in a startup environment, so it's a bit too early. What did you say? When is a good time to bring that up with your leadership team? How long have you had this tool, and who raised the idea? Did it come from product managers, or was it driven by the leadership? When is a good time, and how?
I don't know where we got Heap though. Because New Relic was like New Relic, so we used New Relic for we used a bunch of things before the New Relic.
We have Heap for 2.5 hours.
Yes.
Years. Years.
Yeah.
We had analytics before.
Yeah, we were doing quite a bit of monitoring on like a raw data from, you know, just logging, you know, like some basic structure of the API calls. So, and that at some point we run out of like things to do with it. Like we wanted to do more complex things at some point.
Yeah. And our leadership really loves data, like really loves data. So I think they are also, you know, they really see the value in like us having that like really, data. So that
I would say on the product side, like we were using like Azure for a while, which I absolutely loved. But we started to onboard more product managers, and Azure is pretty technical.
True.
So like between us constantly asking our data team, like all the product managers asking them for questions, and they have a much smaller team, right? Our head of data, so Boita, he came up with Heap and was like, try this out and see if you think you guys can use it. And then like we sort of, I think Jakub set it up and we started playing around with it, and we're like, oh my gosh, we can have all of this information and like not have to rummage for it. So I would say, honestly speaking, even if it's like a tool that requires some, I won't say code skill, some ability to like pull that information, the sooner that you can get information about data, the better, because you're not just relying off gut feelings. Like you're actually able to make data informed decisions, and having questions that like seem really simple, that you can't even say, how long does it take someone to do this, and well, to do a workflow? How long does that take? What is the funnel? I'm like, I have no idea. There's no way for me to look at. I've got to ask the data team to build a funnel for checking in a reservation. Yeah. That seems super simple, but not having the tools, the difference between you knowing how to optimize your product and how to optimize it really quickly where it matters, and just sitting there and like hoping. Like if you want to grow quickly and you have data, it takes you from growing at a steady pace to completely changing the pace of how you can get information and grow your company as well, to be honest.
Right. This is brilliant. So I think you've just said lots of amazing things about your company, Mews. So if you had to say one word about what's the best thing about working in this company, what is it maybe for each of you?
F2, and it will be super fast.
Go.
My team and autonomy. Like the fact that we are not given, okay, this is the feature you will be working on this year, but really just like high level goals, and then it's up to us how we will find ways and how we will prioritize to achieve this goal. So really that level of responsibility, accountability, and autonomy, that it's up to our team to choose our way of doing things. That's really something I like.
So now I need to also say our team.
Look all the good ones.
Yeah, so our team, I would say ambitious. Like it's there is a huge amount of hunger for doing stuff, better, faster, more scale, usable, and all of these things. Yeah.
I would say that we
Your
put
team.
our team.
For sure.
I like the fact that we genuinely put our customers first, in the sense that we are trying to solve their business problems. And moving from in an industry that was, again, very old, and they didn't have access to all the new like cloud-based technologies, we have so many opportunities. But we have always said, like, as a company, we don't just build features, we solve business problems. And you can see from our customers that have been super successful with Mews, like some of them have grown a tremendous amount, that they've even rebranded. Like, I guess I can mention one of them. Like, we used to have the student hotel became the social hub, where they went from just being a hotel that had a couple of services and managing students and maybe offices, to becoming an entire hub where they thought about managing their spaces in a different way. Like, we went and we solved problems. And I think that entire perspective, it's so exciting to actually go to work every day and think, I'm actually going to solve something that makes a difference.
Brilliant. I notice we all have different definitions of what one word means. No, but I was about to ask you to elaborate, of course. So it was great fun to be with you. You're lovely people, and I can see the passion, the ambition, that you have for your product. If I had talked to another product trio in the company, what do you think would have been different? Like, would they have said different things about how they work? What do you think?
Depending on how long they are with us.
Definitely on how long they've worked together. But I think the first thing that I learned as a product manager working with the trio was not having enough understanding of what the other trio are doing, to the point that knowing the sheer amount of value there is in working within a trio.
Yeah.
It was so good that I would just agree with that.
Just like our team.
Our team.
So that's going to be the final word then. And so it was your first podcast. How did you find it? You can tell terrible. I'm a product manager. I'm used to feedback and bad feedback.
No, that was brilliant. I really liked your questions. It really made us realize so much of what we've learned since we've worked together. That was really cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was perfect.
Cool.
How was that for us?
Amazing. I had so much fun. It was great. I love your background, even if it's not the company background you wanted to put in. And I'm sure lots of people would potentially want to carry on the conversation with you. So are you on LinkedIn? Can they contact you individually? If they're interested maybe in the company as well?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to seeing what new products and features you're releasing and how you're changing people's life.
Thank you, Magali.
Thank you.
Right, let me start the recording.